Hey, Phil, I have a question.
Yeah.
My question is, have you ever regretted not starting something that you couldn't quit?
Have I ever regretted not starting something that I couldn't quit?
Or, that's two negatives in the same sentence or question. Or are we asking, are there anything in the whole wide world, any things, any habits, any practices that you're like, gosh, I'm glad I never started that?
That's a tough one, Steve. What are you doing dropping these things here? We're just like, man, yeah.
Just bump it a little higher. Oh, I'm right here. Hold on.
Oh, yeah. You're on YouTube.
Hit me with your best shot. I don't hit me with your best shot.
Welcome to Cut Daisies and Unicorns. This is a Phil and Steve edition. P.S. Right? Fallacies and sorcery, or
I didn't know what was going to come out of your mouth
but that
when
would
you said
be
that.
fallacies would still be an F, not a phallic. Like, I don't know.
See what I mean? See where this went? That's
Sorry.
exactly what I thought you were going to say.
It's already going in a bad direction.
So I'll stroke my beard and be like, so Dr. Freud, what does this really mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's a valley of brotherly love. Phileo,
Right.
Philadelphia,
Uh-huh. Beard tangling.
hook and loop.
Where are we?
Well, for a date stamp, welcome to March 25th, 2021.
Yeah, it is.
So for those in the future
Mm-hmm.
who are looking back on the past, maybe a historical element is included in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm working on like blending my personality with my podcast personality.
Okay.
Apparently people say, two people have said,
Mm-hmm.
that when I get behind the microphone that I take on my NPR personality.
Yeah.
They're like, you don't talk to us normally this way. So I'm going to try to kind of throw in some of my cynicistic vocal inflections and see if I can get back to the real me.
All right. So we're gonna take the opportunity to do some blending of the two.
Well, of all my personalities, those two are the two I'm going to work on blending right now.
Right. And now we got dogs that are barking.
They're in their own different world too.
They are in their own world.
Yeah. Hey, shout out to everybody. Wanted to let you know as we get started on today's episode that I really appreciate your feedback. Put it out on Facebook and Instagram and my personal page and stuff like that. It said we're thinking about doing a live show.
Yeah.
Maybe once a month.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough going on. Let's start there and see what happens.
Sure.
But kind of looking at how can we invite you into a live conversation for us together. The cool thing about technology is we can get this set up so that we can just send out Zoom. If somebody comes up with a good conversation going on, we could just send them a Zoom link and we could all of a sudden we could have them on the show live without even planning on it.
It's true. It'd be really simple.
Super simple. And since we talk for at least like an hour and 15 to an hour and a half or whatever on any given moment that we're deciding to record, then we could have multiple people in
Right.
if we wanted to. But what we're planning to do is Facebook Live an event and use the chat feature conversation, be able to do that and work that out so that we can be able to have a live interaction and dialogue.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then it also gives us an opportunity to get live feedback instead of, hey, everybody, try to give us some feedback, and then it takes, however long to be able to get back.
But we're seeing a trickle.
We are.
That's how it starts. Yeah, you can't drink from a fire hydrant, Phil.
Exactly.
Well,
I guess you're bound to drink something, but it also might make you drown.
Yeah, exactly. So for the more morbid thinking people out there, I mean, if you're looking for a way to drown, drink from a fire hydrant. Yeah. So it's Phil and Steve edition.
It is. As always, you never know what's going to happen. Never.
It's so unknown. Yeah. And I even, I threw a watermelon out there yesterday. We were working on a tech project over at the church, and I was like, hey, so we're going to talk about the shootings? Yeah. And Phil, you had so many things going through your head yesterday and stuff like that. You're like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, and stuff like, and so I'm like, oh, man, this is one of those, it might get weird, or it might get serious.
Yeah.
Or it might be frivolous, or it could be mundane. I mean, all of those options, it's a smorgasbord of options available to us right now.
And I think it's also as I mentioned here, when we talked about, is we have an opportunity to piss off a whole segment of people, different segments of different people, so that also could be the possibility of just making everybody, or not everybody, but certain people angry as we talk about that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know, haven't you felt that all along the way?
Yeah.
I totally have. I remember telling my mom once, we were talking about the move to Chicago, and I'm like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to writing a new album. And she's like, really? I said, yeah, I'm attracted to artists that just bare their souls and stuff. And I said, I just wonder what it would be like not being an employee of a church to just really say what's on my mind. And she goes, oh my gosh. She goes, there's more of your mind to share than what you're already sharing right now. And I was like, absolutely yes. Yeah. Filters. That's why paying attention to chemical intake really matters. Filters, and stuff. And so, at some point, your body wears out and so does your mind, and then your filters are gone. I'm like, hey, nursing home ladies, I'm really sorry for what I'm going to say. I don't even know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yep, on this episode, we are all over the place. So if you have attention deficit disorder, this is the podcast for you, because we're going to be all over the place and we're going to bounce around, jump around, take a look around. We're going to see things that are on the upside, on the downside. We're going to see sideways. We're going to be sideways. We're going to look on whether we could play a 1965 flip-top bass amp by Ampeg. My buddy Chris Fordyce has got one of those. Oh, one of my favorite bass amps ever that I've ever heard played through. So, as we digress, we recognize that as you've been following, been faithful, giving feedback, shout out to you, kudos. Thank you so much.
Keep it up. We need more as we continue to build momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm still trying to, also we still want to make sure what's the preferred medium still? We're getting a couple of people just subscribing to the audio that are completely different than the people who are subscribing to the YouTube or liking or being on the Instagram versus, Facebook And so where does that still that avenue that people, I mean, because if you love to watch it, then what's the best time? Because for me, when I'm doing audio podcasts and I listen to a whole bunch of them, I usually then, stick in mainly to the audio and listening to it while I work out. Because then it's like, yeah, I'm keeping my mind active while I'm, engaging in healthy activities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what is it for you guys out there? I mean, where's because it would be hard for me to watch the YouTube of our podcast while I'm working out. I don't like to watch a lot of things while I'm working, but what is it? Where are people at with that?
Well, I think based on views, the thing that Instagram does is Instagram is a great place for people to find us. The really bad thing about our current situation is there's so much going on that we're not really consistent. What I try to do is post Thursday. So like on Friday, I try to go in, grab the link, throw it into Instagram. And the people who are following us on Instagram, I mean, we see directly that but I don't put in the podcast link. I put in the YouTube link. So I'm kind of tilting that one a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think the podcast link just is it goes out there whenever I think we're logged on to, if I'm not mistaken, we're logged on to all of our regular channels, but so that's why even on our YouTube channel, it still posts the audio.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. That's what we're looking forward to. Like continuing to look at, the audio is still being listened to and downloaded, at a good rate. It's not excellent. It's not, I would say maybe fine right now. We'd always look for more.
Consistent.
Right.
Yeah. The people who are listening are consistently listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's us getting started on Dr. Freud and where we're at right now. So
Right.
So it's Phil and Steve edition.
It is.
This is episode 10.
Episode 10.
And
we made it to double digits.
Whoa. Not too bad.
No.
For the first week in April.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's another greeting. April Fools.
Yeah. That would mean for us, we're looking to the future. Even though for those who are listening, it's the present.
I know. I'm telling you, this time travel thing has got to get legs.
Mm-hmm.
At some point in time, people are going to be like, and how much further into the future? I mean, we're putting this out on the interwebs. Do you know when YouTube was discovered or invented?
At some point in time, I did when I was looking at my social media stuff. I would probably say somewhere in the late 90s, but it's probably, I'm sure it was even before that. But do you have the date?
February 14th, 2005.
Ooh, I was way late. I was way early. Sorry.
That's to when was YouTube created? Who was the first YouTuber?
Charlie bit my finger?
Nope. This makes co-founder Jawed Karim the first YouTube when he uploaded an 18-second video called Me at the Zoo. 2005. We're talking about 16 years.
It's like an early Vine, or now what they've turned it into, TikTok.
Oh.
So those are like short clips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 1997, Netflix rolled out. 1998, Google. We had YouTube in 2005 and Twitter in 2006.
Yeah, Yeah, some reason I don't know. I thought it was earlier than that.
Do you know who the CEO of YouTube is?
Well, now they're owned by Google, right? So, are
That is the parent organization,
yeah.
2006. Susan, Wojcicki. Yeah.
Huh. Well, keep powering through, Susan.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it shortly, I mean, after its creation, it shot up to, like rivaling Google for a search engine,
Oh,
you know, like,
it's still,
and it's still, I think, number two behind Google.
yeah.
But, so people even go there to search for, like whatever it might be.
The
It's a
service
great
was
place to search.
created by 3 former PayPal employees,
Huh.
and Chad, Steve, and Jawed. In November, so we're talking about February 2005, February 2006 to November. So in 18 months, Google bought it for 1.65 billion.
Of when? When did they buy it?
November 2006.
Yeah, so it was like a year
And a half later.
and a half.
February,
Yeah.
March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 9.
So just shy of 2 years. So it was
Just,
there.
yeah, just
So it exploded, and then their Google was like, yeah, let's add that to our platform.
as of May 2019, there were more than 500 hours of content uploaded to YouTube each minute,
That's great.
and 1 billion hours of content being watched on YouTube every day.
It's a crazy amount of content.
And that's pre-pandemic,
Right.
with everything else blowing up that's going
Oh, yeah.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of I heard so Google does this well at a certain point. I don't even know if they do it anymore, but they would like every week or so, I think it was weekly. They would give their especially the different departments, they would give them the opportunity to say, "Hey, what's something that you would improve that's not in your area?"
Yeah.
And they would go and then kind of create things that were, or talk about improvements in those
Yeah.
other areas, and like crazy things have come out of, like Gmail came out of different things across the board, that they would like, hey, like this is a good idea to either start or something that's not in our area, and they would just give them the freedom to start and improve things across their platform.
Yeah.
What a great idea.
Well, it's an interesting concept, because what we're dealing with is we're dealing with planned margin.
Mm-hmm.
And so that an organization would find that space, now this gets us back to physics, because we as human bodies are made up of more space than we are anything else,
Mm-hmm.
according to a physicist. But when you have planned space, then what you're able to do is you leave yourself room. Do you know that's why there's margin in books? So that the human mind can be able to take up that. With that margin, it allows you to be able to go line by line. If it went edge to edge and top to bottom with no margin,
Yeah.
it's very difficult for the human mind to take in.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Much like life.
Mm.
When you've got no
No
space,
margins.
when you have no margin, then how chaotic does life get,
Right.
or it seem to get? You got all these parents running around. They're like, we're so busy, we're so busy, we're so busy. I'm like, well, then say no to something.
Right.
You don't have to say yes to everything. And what is your best no? I think somebody wrote a book about that. No, it's actually the best yes. And so, which again is a different way for your mind to grab onto. Are things going to be framed in a negative way, or are things going to be framed in a positive way? And that is, but gosh, I mean, hey, moms and dads, this is why you're the parent. You're the parent to be able to provide these, and we've talked about in the past, these boundaries that are safe boundaries that allow for a child to be able to have space, to be able to be a child. What was that one TV show where the little girl was like this ballet or dancer competitor? Do you remember that?
Was it reality or was it
Yeah, it was totally reality.
scripted?
Yeah. Well, no,
I
there's
mean, there you right. Another conversation whether all
Is there
reality
any-
TV is actually scripted.
yeah. We know it's heavily edited.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They still only allow you to see what they want you to see.
Yeah. And want to shape you to see.
Mm-hmm.
But, the real question then moves into, is reality TV propaganda? Did they come up with an idea of a reality TV show that becomes propaganda for the form of? I think it just moves. If it's propaganda, it's propaganda for capitalism, so that advertisers can be able to sell product. What do you think?
Well, it is funny.
People would call it marketing.
Right. Well, when you're looking at
We call it propaganda.
when you look at whether it's a TV show, whether it's movies, there was a point in time on TV and movies that you couldn't show any product because of the product saying you can't show our product.
Copyright.
Right. But now you start to look at it, and this is where you start to look at movies that are you're showing Toyota or Honda or what, and it's like we know that they're either paying you to show it or or you're paying to have it shown.
I think,
and so like Coke, Pepsi, you look at these large products, Nike. I mean, and all of these people are now then displaying it on the movie. You're like, oh, what are you trying to sell me? Are you actually trying to tell a story in this movie, or are you just trying to sell me a whole bunch of products?
Yeah.
That are like, oh, look at this, famous actor that wears these shoes or this, like.
Yeah.
Just tell your story.
Yep. March 25th, 2021. Shoe wear by Coble. Rainbow flip-flops. Wearing the rainbows. Go to rainbows, go to rainbows, go to rainbows. Hashtag not a sponsor. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have blackbirds and unicorns.
We do, because
There's no sponsor there.
our monitor's gone.
I'm trying to see. I don't think there's anything else in the shot. I mean, rare bird.
Oh, Turnpike Troubadours.
There you go. So, also, none of these are sponsors. We're not trying to get you to. Well, I mean, you could if you haven't listened to the Troubadour Troop.
Yeah.
Go listen, check them out. But
yeah.
it's not. We're not paid to endorse that. We'll tell you. We will be upfront with you. If there's a product that we're going to get paid to promote, then we're going to tell you this is a paid promotion.
Endorse.
Right.
Yeah. Any endorsements.
Yeah.
Yeah. Full disclosure.
We're going to be upfront.
Affiliate marketing.
Yeah.
As that happens, we will totally let you know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you're wondering, well, then this podcast is a sellout. No. We're not having the sponsors tell us what to say.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we can be like our engineer, John, and he's saying, is there a moment that we can sell out? I'm looking for that moment to sell out.
Well, we were just talking about how do you come up with an idea on a podcast that in 18 months somebody would want to affiliate us, buy us out, and give us $1.5 billion. We'd have to rename the podcast.
Probably.
Collective ignorance. Let us sit and make fun of the collective ignorance of humanity.
Right.
I mean, even like in the idea of it doesn't matter what you say. We were talking about this earlier today. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what you say. The reality is that humanity's in really bad shape right now because there's going to be somebody on one side or the other side that's going to want to just pop off and just be angry. So,
Yeah. There's always going to be someone who's angry. Whether it's the
seems like more people are angry now than ever.
well, which goes back to our whole dualistic mind, right? If everybody's creating a camp, then you've got to follow the camp when you're in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you say anything that's going to be contrary to what the camp says, then you're like, all right, now you're kicked out of the camp. Why? Because we're creating these two, like it's always got to be this or this.
Yeah.
And like when you're creating this or this and then you're trying to speak in the middle, like now you're done.
Yeah.
Or you're trying to create your own.
So we're doing a lot of information just dropping the bomb right now. Like we're bouncing all over the place. People are like, "Hey, what's going on?" I would just say you really need to go back to the beginning. Start with the origins. Get into our first couple trailers. We talk about some weird stuff and kind of bring you along, do an introduction to ourselves. But start listening through, and you'll hear these thematic things rise to the top. But what I was going to go back to is, you know why we're going to frustrate people. I'm going to drop another, I don't know. It's a big thing out there, but people don't really know it well. A lot of people don't know it well, and the few people that really know it well are continuing to fight for other people to know it well. But the Enneagram.
Oh yeah.
In regards to the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 9. And so when people are like, well, why do you have to be the person that you are, that you think that, you can embrace everyone? And actually the issue with the Enneagram 9, Richard Rohr on YouTube has a series on the Enneagram. Anybody who's interested in learning more about it, I would say start there, because the Enneagram was meant to be taught verbally, like passed on through verbal teaching in person. It was never intended to be a book read. But as this goes back, he goes, you're probably wandering through and you're going through, hey, and he was on like number 8. And he's like, hey, if I'm getting to number 8 and you still don't know who you are, you're either going to be an 8 or you're going to be a 9. And I'm like, fascinating. He goes, and I'll get through the 9 and the real 9s still wonder who they are, because one of their major things that take them up or like make them up is mediation, bridge building. So when they go around the circle of the Enneagram, they see themselves in everything, which is very confusing, because people are like, well, this is personality. I find out what I am. And the idea of mediation is to be able to go to the other person. We keep preaching this gospel. Seek to understand before being understood. Seek to understand before being understood. And so the reality is I can get in the shoes of other people. I'm like, oh, I see where they're coming from. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can see where they're coming from. Oh, I can see where they're coming from. And then somebody's like, gets all worked up and like, why won't you stand for anything? You're standing for everyone. You need to take a side. I'm like, do I? I'm like, so I was processing our last discussion about why can't we just love each other? And where somebody might come up with that's some hippie idea, or, free love, and we shoot back to the 60s and 70s, love, peace, and happiness, and,
Don't forget about the dope.
We'd never forget about the dope.
It's always a funny word when somebody says dope. Like, okay. Like, you can tell, like, it ages them.
Yeah.
Like, you use the word dope still?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was.
I still giggle every time it's 4:20 and I look at when like 4:20 in the afternoon. Like, why? How is it when I walk by the kitchen clock on the stove and it's 4:20? I'm like, should I have the munchies right now?
Right.
I just do like 3 little birds. It's all good. But Yeah, okay, and we talked about microdosing on the last episode a little bit with Clem and some things like that. We've actually talked about, for those of you who are wondering if we're like gonna just go down this chemical,
Mm-hmm.
road and stuff like that. Me personally, I I don't do it. Don't microdose. Don't smoke weed. The reality is I've embraced my frailty. Just in regards to I just couldn't trust myself with it.
Mm-hmm.
I just it's that edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
I just don't want to step off. There's
Yeah. This remind a couple of things that come to mind.
yeah.
One is a word that we use prior to hitting record, as well as chaos, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I was also listening to another podcast where there was a guy who's he's like some psychologist, but and here's the thing, he is an active heroin user. Now, when we think about it, so he then wrote a book called, and I want to get this right. It's like uh, using, uh, it's like drug use for adults. Yeah, drug use for grown-ups. And the guy is, I mean, it was kind of, it's one of those ones, is Dr. Carl Hart, drug use for grown-ups. He is an active heroin user, but he's saying that there is, like there can be an area, room for people who are recreationally bringing these elements in there without. And he says that, I mean, he's been famous in this for, he decided, so as an active heroin user, he said he wanted to debunk many of these things that people talk about in use. So he went through the heroin withdrawal, because people are saying that like heroin withdrawal can kill you. Actually, it's alcohol withdrawal that actually has led people to death. But he says heroin, he says, is like a symptom of the flu,
Huh.
which he went through, and he says it's not pleasurable to go through the experience, but he's like, it's not also the end of the world.
Yeah.
He's like, so he took, I mean, I think he said he might have had a day off of work for going through heroin withdrawal. So to me, it's even fascinating, this whole, and he says, like, if you are a responsible adult, meaning he goes through and defines what responsible looks like keeping your, having a job, keeping your responsibilities. Are you a parent? Are you, and making sure that all of those things are done. And he's like, if you're responsible in that, like, why can't you, embrace some of these things? I'm like to me, it gets into, like, I don't know. I mean, is anybody actually responsible then? Is anybody actually able to embrace all of that and still, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an active Coke user, or, I don't know. Like, to me, that would be chaotic.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody, I don't know. I still have a hard time believing that within each of us that there can still be a degree of like, no, I can be an active heroin user and still be, contributing member of society and not fall down a path of addiction. And yeah. So to me, I mean, and he says that he is, and still responsible, but makes room for the use of it. What do you think about that?
I think that I was really afraid of where you were going with this.
Yeah,
Until
me too.
so
But
just
when
to
you
be
brought up
clear,
microdosing, that's what was.
yeah, just to be clear, you're on the record to say you would not recommend doing drugs. Or you're not
I don't. That's where I'm conflicted. Now, I don't, I mean, because here we're at this point, like, I don't know if I'm ready to, I mean, like, I also don't microdose.
right.
my mom does periodically listen to our podcast, but like I have, I mean, marijuana has been a part of my existence.
Yeah.
And there's,
You're not going to claim that you didn't inhale.
yeah, I fully embraced that.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a time.
Right.
There was a
I
time.
brought it in and pushed it out.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at that, though, I'm like, to me, it goes back to the same thing with other chemical substances, right? I mean, whether it's alcohol, whether it was nicotine, whether it's sugar, caffeine, right? I mean, I look at it and say, anything then be driven to a part of like addiction.
Oh,
And the brokenness that I think is like that embrace in me is like just understanding what's my level. Like, and you talked about clarity and keeping a clear mind. So is there some part where these things can have, I don't know. Because like to me, we're talking about mind altering.
yeah.
And that would I don't think I'm a complete human being then, so I don't think I'm going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Like embrace that and still be able to say I can be contributing, functioning person, and I don't know.
So for context, in our last episode, when Clem mentioned that, she mentioned microdosing in lieu of depression and that there was a mental illness of friends of hers that were treated that way. She
Right.
said that wasn't for her.
Right.
And she said she was thankful for a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're just dropping in to listen to this episode, we're bringing you along to understand that we're just going down a conversation path of discovery and contemplation. We're contemplating, hey, this is something we haven't really thought about or formulated. Here then moves into I'm gonna back us up about 16 minutes, okay, and talk about we sprung off the board concerning tribalism and people being judgy, and so the conflict is: do you jump into the tribe that says just say no? Do you jump into the tribe that says, well, no, doing drugs is sin? Do you jump into the tribe that says, hey, there could be room for growth here for humanity? We jump in. There's some, and then again, here's the Enneagram 9 coming out into me. There's a lot of different perspectives to be able to work this through. There's some people on here that are part of the 12-step program,
Right.
that listen to the podcast. And this podcast will come with an explicit warning, full trigger warning, and put it out there that, if this is an area that, like, if you see a beer on TV or somebody having a glass of whiskey and you salivate and you start thinking about relapse, we don't want you to listen to this stuff. But we're just using a topic to create a forum for how you can think through different topics within our society. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's all it's meant to be. And I think both of us would be able to say, we understand and we have known people who have been highly addictive, whether it's meth. Personally, we talked with a gentleman who was addicted to heroin, moved away from Chicago, went to Des Moines. And where I land with weed is it's not manufactured.
Right.
It's not like a combination of all these chemicals put together and manufactured by humans. It's coming from the ground, and where I stand on it is I'm like, hey, if you want to smoke weed, smoke weed. Certainly there's enough scientific evidence that alcohol is a greater harm to the body than weed is.
Which is recreationally legal anyways, which is the reason why we can say it here in
Chicago,
the state of Illinois.
Yeah, we're not promoting.
Right.
Yeah. But that being said, personally, I'm going to say I never smoke weed, not plan to ever smoke weed. Actually, I'm planning not to ever smoke weed, just because I know me. And, man, if there's a whole list of things, and this is, we're getting through this to come to this place. Do you know yourself well enough?
Right.
Have you taken time to do the inner work within you to be able to say, I know that's not a good step for me. That there are people who love sports. They love sports. That any sport. Actually, one of the highest complaints of the pandemic that I ran into were people in my life who love to watch sports so much, and when it got shut down, I'm like, somebody was like, "Yeah, you can still bet on like some game that's being played here and whatever." But what did I just introduce? So now we're talking about gambling, and so even to the point of not
Right.
only do you alienate yourself from community because of the time to watch the sports, but then you move into, is there risk-based behavior? What is this costing your family? What is this costing you in a wholeness of life? And it's not, I mean, do I think gambling's sin? No, personally, I don't. And I'm like, why do I have to put it in the context of what a conservative religious believer would do that? Well, because I know that there are some of those people listening to the podcast, but just in context, then there's other people who are like, why are we even talking about this? Because, I mean, this is just all part of life, and people make decisions to be able to do it.
Right.
Final thought in this area
Before we move on.
for my diatribe. My final thought on this would be that what in my raised awareness of observation, the thing that comes out to me is how many people used drugs, alcohol, chemical, and came to a time in life when they said, this is not working in my body. Leonard Nimoy, his son, Johnny Cash, and the list goes on. I remember a lot, I mean, it seemed like a lot of the Des Moines musicians. I was a booking agent in Des Moines for a little bit, and always the question was, hey, how much is the place going to pay, and what are the benefits? Like, are there free drinks? Is there free food? And stuff like that. And, people would be pushing for more money and be like, well, hey, they get, a free drink an hour and, and dinner, before or after or to go.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, oh, but so-and-so, has been sober for 7 years and they don't drink. Can we just convert that into, finances? And then there are a lot of musicians that the reason why they play in the bar isn't for the $100 a night in Des Moines scene, but it's because they get free drinks all night long. And it's a great way to support their drinking habit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think then we move into a place to ask the question, what's motivating you?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a thread within humanity of how by checking out, and then you just have to start asking the questions. And we've posed nature versus nurture before, but what is it that's driving the thing to escape what you're escaping?
Yeah, and that's what I always get back to anyways, is like what are we trying to run from?
Yeah.
And what are we trying to not feel? Because that to me is what, escapism, it's huge. And that's where I always, talk about, whether we're talking about a chemical addiction, there's something that's always underneath it. Always. I've never seen a case of addiction in chemical that there's not something else underneath.
And
Never seen it. I mean, if you're out there and you're saying, no, I only had this, I've got no issues elsewhere, like, tell me, because I've never seen it.
Yeah. And so to follow that line, just in being transparent and vulnerable on the podcast with listeners, I would say that when chemical has become the biggest issue in my life as far as use and a problem, is that I see like three major areas showing up. An area of where there's tension. And so I want to avoid dealing with the tension. I subconsciously or unconsciously use just to take a break from having to face or deal with the emotional tension of what's going on. And usually that can be in conflict, or it can be a personal relationship conflict. I mean, there's that. Another thing is that I've just found that, like, how my mind works, I've allowed for my mind to be able to tell myself physiologically, hey, you're going to rest better. You'll get more sleep, versus dealing with less sleep during the night or interrupted sleep because I haven't had chemical in me. And then I came to this third thing, which is why I brought up chaos. And that is, if we believe that we are not the same people that we were in any given moment, because every moment that passes by, this plays into my time travel thing. If I am becoming a different person than I've ever been before, because every moment that passes by informs me to become the person I'm going to become, then I have to be able to take a look at that and see what I was, and also to be able to adjust in the direction of what I desire to become. Now, me personally, I would link into that in the divine. I would be asking to deity, to the divine, I understand that you've made me to become something. Can you reveal to me what you would have me become?
Mm-hmm.
And what this week, as I was doing some inner work, I looked back and I thought, oh my gosh. For just short of the last 20 years of my life, chaos has been such a part of my life that when the waves dissipate and the water gets still, I'm inclined to inflict chaos upon myself. If not in life situations, in the internal turmoil to create for myself.
Yeah.
And so even use then can become the active agent to allow me to be comfortable in what I have been formed into based on chaos. And so, man, when I put that together, now I have a different conversation with deity. I'm like, every moment I choose, I can become what you already know me that I am becoming. And so embracing peace, embracing stillness, embracing the opportunity of development and growth. Now, I know I just rant. I think these are good things to think about.
Yeah, because chaos is a big word, because as I think about chaos, I mean, I think that there's chaos external and chaos internal.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, as I think I've talked about on here before, like having a hard time with quietness outside because of chaos inside.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many things that just, kind of process up here. And there's so many things that I'm like, all right, so like, how can I ever get that to quiet or subside? I've got to have more happening outside than I do on the inside.
Yeah.
And we talked about it in the motion and stillness,
Yeah.
Part. So I'm not going to dive into that, but chaos just reminds me of that there's You talked about life, and chaos, and like when that subside, like then trying to create more in order to be comfortable because that's what you knew, that's what it was like. You were missing something if there wasn't.
Well, and so programmed, just so programmed from, go go go, and basically listening to people coming with conflict. I spent a lot of 10 years as being a counselor, mediating conflict between employees and coworkers, as well as levels of staff. And so having that, and for those of you who are out there and listening to this, you're like, oh my word. Actually, folks, this is a healthy conversation to be able to be open about, to be able to say, this is a part of the human experience. And so it really is a good place to be into being able to come to those things. I would take the fluff of our conversation and boil it down to, hey, in your current mind, are you committed to community or are you committed to your tribe? Community is more than two people. It takes dualism out of the way and it allows for an ascension to a place of becoming greater than just yourself and your tribe and what your tribe believes. Then I would also boil it down to, there are many things that humans face that are detrimental to themselves. We talked about drugs, we talked about alcohol, we talked about chemical, but just as it was brought up, it could be many different things.
Right.
Some people are addicted to anger because of power and control. They just like to get angry because they can control people based on that. I think Robert De Niro even made a movie about that, anger management. So, all of those things going to come back to, hey, what work are you doing in the personal development? Because quite frankly, if you look around, humanity's in bad shape right now, but humanity doesn't have to stay in bad shape.
Right.
So the only way that we can be helpful to others is to be in a healthy place ourselves. Mm-hmm. What steps do you need to take? And I would put it out there. If you're in a place where you're in a bad spot and you're like, I don't know what to do. Actually, we're going to list in the description. We'll do the suicide hotline. We'll do addiction connection hotline. We'll do sports betting hotline. There are many resources available. But the greatest tragedy would be for you to not care and just be stuck when no one else can make these decisions for you.
Right.
And so, thankfully, I'm grateful to have a community of people who care and love about. Maybe you're in a place where you don't feel that anyone cares or loves you, and just understand that in your aloneness and in your pit of despair in that, we just want to be a voice to be able to say, hey, no, there is help. And so...
Yeah, because that's what I find with the whole conversation is that addiction isolates. And it'll either isolate you alone by yourself, or it's going to isolate you with other people who have the same addictions.
Right.
Right, because you're then going to be you want to affirm where you're at.
Right.
And that's where why I brought that thing up with this drug use for grown-ups, meaning like he's advocating for something. I'm saying like I bring it up just as a sake of there are people who are trying to advocate, but I'm like it doesn't make sense to me why.
Yeah.
Because of, and I think many of the times we have been personally affected by addiction, and so there's much of that that's like why it doesn't make sense to me why someone would advocate for this, because I feel like that there's something in us that leads us to embrace things that are eventually going to isolate us.
Well, and
And you brought in community, and that's a huge part of being able to embrace, like, how do I learn? I learn from other people and their reflection of me as well. I learn, like, somebody says, "Hey, do you know, like, it seems like you might have some issues," and you're like, "No, I haven't." But maybe it's a good time to look at it and see.
yeah,
And how do you learn that if your addictions isolate? And yes, there can be all kinds of addictions, not just chemical.
yeah,
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 you talked about anger. I mean, there's all kinds of addictions.
yeah.
And that's just
Well,
a small segment.
domineering,
Yeah.
control. I mean, narcissism,
Hmm.
having to be the center of attention. You know, I think we go back to Solomon's song in that there is nothing new under the sun, and when you get to the end of it, you know, I think of Eric Clapton. Here's another musician gave it all up because he looked in the mirror and realized that, I mean, his soul was gone.
Hmm.
Elton John, I don't even know what his sobriety birthday is, but Elton John, I look around and I don't see posters of celebration of addicts in any circle being lifted up and magnified.
Hmm.
What I do see is I see humanity when it finds itself in a trap and turns and goes a different direction, that they're still alive to talk about it or have been
Hmm.
in the past. I don't know. Very, very interesting things.
Yeah, I was just thinking, as we brought up the mass shootings, um and I think, that sometimes there's more of a focus on the shooter than there is on the victims, which is wrong. But there is something to learn from these people who would even imagine in their head that I should take an AR-15 and go out there and just start shooting people. Like, but what? I mean, I believe that there's people that get to that place because of isolation as well.
Sure.
And whether it could be addiction, I don't know. But what I do know is that isolation, you start to play with your own head, and you start to be able to even converse in your head, with yourself.
Yeah.
And you're creating your own, problems. You're also creating your own solutions, which are most likely, if you're creating your own problems and solutions, it's not going to lead to anything good.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, studying the mind of the shooters, the mind of the serial killers. I mean, I was into that, quite a bit, in
Yeah.
college,
Yeah.
studying, like some of those things. And like, I think there's a fascinating part of it. And it doesn't mean that I want to jump into to do that, but I think it's a fascinating perspective. You're like, what leads someone to that break?
Yeah.
And is it, for many serial killers, it's this long process of what, even from child,
Yeah.
years. But that's the things that, going back to what you were saying, is like, we have to do some of that work, with ourselves, but also, I believe, within community.
Yeah.
Because then you're saying, like, all right, I'm going to have to like, I know for me, I always have to figure out, like, why is it that I'm uncomfortable with silence? Why am I uncomfortable, in that space? And I've been trying to do that work. It's just uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that it's in that process of then opening up and saying, hey, community,
Yeah.
what do you think? Like, what makes people struggle with, silence or,
Yeah.
so. Gotta
Well,
do
once
that.
again, we have come to a place where we have brought up more questions than we have answers to.
Always.
Always, always more questions. And so we do have to sign off. And we just want to let you know that as we walked with you down the path, hey, here's some things to consider. if you are struggling with chemical dependency, don't wait. Don't wait for the day when it should be a good day. Get some help. And maybe you find yourself thinking thoughts of selflessness or despair, sadness, heaviness, mourning. Reach out to a friend. If you don't have a friend, find a professional who will help walk you through the process of what you're going through. And just know that as zany as we'll ever be, Phil and I are just two human beings traveling through the universe, collecting stories, making stories, telling stories, and being about the story. So we're glad you were here and able to listen in, take a look, and see what's going on. And we will look forward to, I believe it's going to be April 11th, Sunday evening. Time yet to be determined. We're going to have more video on when we're going to be doing that. But we wanted to put it out to you that we're going to do a live show, kind of hit some highlights of some different things that we've talked about and continue the thought process and the conversation. So,
right. And that'll be when we can make it weird.
Oh, it's totally going to be weird.
It's going to be weird.
All right.
All right. Thanks for journeying with us. It's always good to, we journey together, but then bringing other people into the journey is also just an incredible opportunity.
Yep. We really appreciate that. All right. So we're going to take a couple weeks off on Thursdays. We got to episode 10.
We did.
Actually, the next time we shoot an episode, which will be episode 11, we're going to be in a new studio. Yeah. And so we're going to make our goals to move the studio from Phil's office study into a room that's become available for us to be able to do that. So we're looking forward to that transformation. We're looking forward to, in season 2 of 2021, to be able to move into offering some live events, and we'll share more with you as we go.
We're looking forward to it, so hopefully you will too.
I know I am. Looking forward.
Right.
I keep tripping over the past. Time to move forward.
It's a big strip.
Right on. Take it easy, everybody.
Take care.